and ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Brenda, and then she's going to pass it off to the other specialists.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Brenda Yankoviak. I'm the National Trail Program Manager for the Forest Service. And it's super fun for me because Carol was my first boss. She hired me into my first permanent position with the Forest Service as a SCEP 20 some years ago as a rec program manager on the Clearwater Forest. So it's fun to be able to work with Carol in this way. And I'll pass it over to Andy.
Hi everybody, my name is Andy Welsh. I'm currently the Acting Assistant National Trail Program Manager. My normal job, so I'm on temporary assignment to the Washington office. My normal job is as a Deputy District Ranger in California on the standstill.
Del,
I guess I'll go to Del, next. Sorry.
We'll go Del and then Matt.
Del, go ahead and turn your mic on. Matt, why don't you go ahead and we'll work on a little bit of technical difficulty there with Del's microphone.
No problem. I am Matt Abel. I am currently the Trail Database Modernization Product Owner, which means I am leading up the effort to modernize our InfraTrails database, our NRM Trails database. Very exciting project, very overdue. So hopefully we'll come up with a very much improved product here in the not too distant future. My most recent job prior to taking this project on is the Trails and Dispersed Rec Program Manager for the Daniel Boone National Forest in Winchester, Kentucky, Region 8. And I'm also the Region 8 Trail Advisory Group representative.
Great. And now we'll go to Del because it looks like we've solved his microphone problem.
Yes, thanks, Togan. So my name is Del Orme. I'm the District Recreation Staff Officer on the Cedar City Ranger District on the Dixie National Forest. I'm also Region 4's or the Intermountain Regions Wilderness Advisory Group representative and the current chair of that group. And I also just finished a 120-day detail as the Assistant Acting National Trails Program Manager.
Great. And I should add too, if I could just add quickly, Matt Abel was also an acting Assistant National Trails Program Manager. So we've got 3 generations of actings here with us today.
Thanks, Brenda. We have a lot of experience with us. This is going to be a great panel.
So let's dive in here. So what we're going to do is give you an overview of our National Trail Program. So what do we mean when we say National Trail Program and who are the teams that are supporting that program? And then we'll talk about the 10-Year Trail Shared Stewardship Challenge, or the Trail Challenge as we call it, and our program of work with that. And so we're going to be touching on very specific actions that we're working on under the 10-Year Trail Challenge that, again, we'll be speaking to some of those things that you'd already raised in the chat. So to start off with, just to give you an idea of kind of how we're structured, when we talk about the national program, we have 5 national trail teams. So we have our Washington office trails team, so myself and Andy and Matt, and then we have another trails specialist, Mackenzie Helmendaler, who works with us. And then also Pete Duncan, the regional or the national SOF program manager, is also part of our program. So that's our WO Trails team. And then we have a team of National Scenic and Historic Trail Administrators. So we have 5 national scenic trails that we manage or that we administer in the Forest Service, 1 national historic trail, and each of those have a full-time trail-wide trail administrator, plus there are a couple other liaisons. So that's a national team that meets. And then we have the trail technical team, which are the folks working behind the scenes on maintaining our infra database, our trails, trail bridges, access and travel management database, and they're working behind the scenes when it's upward reporting time, making sure that data integrity is there, all that. We have our Trails Advisory Group. So as Matt Abel had said, he is the chair of the Trails Advisory Group, or the TAG. And so that's 1 field going trails person per region that are selected by the region to represent them, and they meet regularly. And then we have the National Trail Board, which is really the overall kind of the lowercase L leadership body for the trail program. And I say lowercase because we're program managers, not the decision makers, line officers. But this group is comprised of each of the regional trail program managers for the 9 regions, the Washington office trails team, and then 1 representative each from the NSHT team, trail technical team, and the tag. So the National Trail Board, that's really, we're the ones that we meet every 2 weeks, and we're coming up with, in the fall, we have a week-long meeting. We come up with our out-year program of work. The Trail Board is the group that developed the 10-year Trail Challenge with a lot of input from others. But then over this past winter, based on input from implementing the Trail Challenge since February of 2020, based on feedback from partners and agency staff, we updated the challenge this winter, and that was the National Trail Board that led that effort. So that's kind of an idea of who we are. And there's a lot of words on this slide, but what I wanted to convey to you is that we are being very thoughtful about, you know, who we are, what are the values and the philosophies that we bring to the work that we do here at the national level. And what we do is we are all centered around taking actions to professionalize the trail program and be streamlining and improving processes so that we're better supporting those working in the field, so that we are supporting field staff, agency staff, partners, volunteers, so that ultimately we are better serving the public with trails that are sustainable, which is a buzzword, but really the way that we interpret sustainable is that the trails are well designed and well managed to be able to support recreation use today and into the future, and that we're meeting the needs of all of the public. So those are a couple of things that I just wanted to convey to you about kind of the national program and who we are and the things that we are thinking about while we're here. And I think with that, I'll pass it over to Andy.
Thanks, Brenda. Okay, so this slide, hopefully you all have seen this. It's part of the National Trail Strategy. I think we linked it to the in the chat there. So it's one of the graphics that shows up. But basically, for me, this helps provide context for what we're doing, right? So we have 160,000 miles of trail that we manage about in the Forest Service. So those are National Forest Service trails. Of that, it's about 60% that's non-motorized, 40% that's motorized. And then of that non-motorized section, 20% of that's wilderness. So 32,000 miles of wilderness trail that we manage. And then I always look at this slide and I always wonder like where I line out with the forest that I work on, or like what it matters to me. So I did a couple of calculations a little further in that. So over the last 5 years, we can say, actually we can go to the next slide because it's more relevant there. We talk accomplishments. Yeah, so there you go. So this one on accomplishments is another great one because it talks, and it's really apparent if you look right at it, right? So basically split down the middle of that little donut, half of what we do essentially accomplish in a year is done by partners and volunteers. I think that's super relevant to the folks that are actually on the call. It seemed like we had a pretty good split or makeup of partners. So 50% of what we maintain or improve in a year is done by partners. And you've got some smaller bits that are outfitter and guide, a tiny bit that's contractors, and then you can see that force account fire. That's an internal crew, that's a fire crew that's doing maintenance for us. And I think the other part on this one that I love is that basically you can look at it and go, for every dollar that we're given in CMTL, our partners help leverage that at least one more time, right? So we can double our CMTL allocation. What we would have been able to do with that is mostly on that force account side, but you and the partners that are here help bring it in that other basic 50%. And so when I was calculating through this, I wanted to see like where this breaks out by forest. And so just a couple facts here. So the number one forest account accomplishments over the last 5 years. So this is for 5 years, basically, from 18 to 21. It's 5,600 miles from the Custard Gallatin. The number one forest, so this is what they've reported contracting wise, is the Nez Perce, which is Carroll, at 1,776 miles of reported that their contractors did over the last 5 years. The number one for volunteers and partners is actually the Deschutes. So that's 4,300 miles about of trail that they accomplished. The trail maintenance trail either or improved. And then outfitter and guides is the Salmon Chalice with about 500. So I don't know, Carol, if we have that Excel spreadsheet. If you're a data person, you want to actually see those breakouts, or if you're a partner, there's publicly available data that I can give you around those. But really, when you look at that again, there's this huge chunk that split of volunteers and partners are a huge part of our program. So, okay. And all that kind of feeds into like So that's what's happening. We talked about kind of context of what the overall system looks like. And then these documents that we're looking at here are kind of how we think programmatically we want to improve that program or professionalize it, as Brenda said. So we've got a couple different documents in here. You've got that national trail strategy, which we dropped into the chat. We've also got the 10-year trail challenge, which is the focus of what we're talking about here. We've dropped that link and I think the draft guidebook into the chat as well. And then you've got the National Trail Stewardship Act, which is an act that was passed in 2016, which has these sort of bullet points you can see there. So we're talking stewardship plans, we're trying to increase volunteers, we're studying the use of fire crews, we designated some priority areas, and then this O&G fee offset, so outfitter and guide fee offset program, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. In that Trails Challenge, we've broken it out into a couple different phases, and right now we're in phase 1, right? So we're in the launch and learn chunk of this. And so you're going to see hopefully a lot of output coming from at the WO level and the regional level and all those different groups that Brenda mentioned, kind of trying to put stuff out to the field to say, okay, like we're trying to establish this foundational base to build the rest of the program. So not just through the 10-year challenge, but for the trails program in perpetuity, right? So we're doing a lot of foundational work at that first phase that's hopefully not impacting the field. It shouldn't be. That is laying the foundation for us to be able to kind of excel. We'll hit our stride, you can see in phase 2, and then we'll have that peak performance in phase 3. And hopefully we kind of stay at that peak performance as the years continue throughout the 10-year challenge.
And I'm pretty sure the words on that slide are blurry, right? That's not my eyeballs. Okay. So just rest assured, folks, that's our fault. We put blurry words up there, but we'll fix that in the slides.
My accent's bad. I thought that makes it better. There's a clean version of that, I think, in the guidebook, correct, Brenda? Yeah.
Okay. Yes, good call. Yeah.
All right. And then I'll pass it on to Del.
Yeah, Brenda, I thought it was my eyes for a second too. So what is the 10-year shared stewardship challenge? I can never say that. 10-year trail challenge. So there's two goals, objectives of this is to increase our workforce capacity and increase our trail sustainability. So for those of you in the wilderness, a couple of years back, we had, the 10-year wilderness stewardship performance challenge. So this is somewhat similar, and within wilderness stewardship performance, we have elements in that, right? There's different elements that we selected for our wilderness areas. And those elements, are consistent over, once they're selected, they're those elements that for those wildernesses in perpetuity, and you're gonna do things to increase those scores in each of those elements. So the trail challenge is somewhat similar to that. So we have these 7 elements, but these elements aren't necessarily static. We're going to change the work that's done around each of these elements as time goes through the challenge. In those different phases, we're going to learn different things, and we're going to adapt and do different things. For example, in training, right? We're going to work on training for a little bit, and then once we get those trainings done, we're going to work on other training. So they're not static. They're static elements, but within that work, it's going to be dynamic and fit the needs as we learn through the challenge to improve these different elements. So training, workforce, trail sustainability, data. So there's all these different things that all feed back into those 2 overall goals of increasing workforce and trail sustainability. So they all kind of work together. And so what we're going to do, Brenda, go ahead and go to the next slide. So annually, those trails teams that Brenda was talking about earlier are going to identify their program of work for the year associated with those 7 elements. So for this fiscal year, these are some of the elements and projects that those 5 trail teams are working on or working towards to help those two overarching goals. So for example, in that training element, there's 3 major things that we've been working on and are continuing to work on. I'm going to skip over trail core competencies really quickly because there's another slide Andy's going to go into a little bit more detail on that. But related to that trail core competencies, we're working with a partner, American Trails, to centralize trails training. And we're hoping to have that website. I think the goal still is to have that launched here, maybe the end of June or July. Trailskills.org is going to be the website where we're going to host all of those trainings, kind of that one-stop shop for trails trainings for agencies, state organizations, partners, conservation corps, that one-stop shop. One thing that we did, I think it was a couple months, February maybe it was, that we worked on a letter to rec directors and directors of engineering on trail bridge inspections and how volunteers can help out with trail bridge inspections to help us increase that capacity and of doing that work and getting volunteers trained in order to do that, those inspections on behalf of the Forest Service or in partnership with us. Going down to workforce, and I'll probably skip over this one too. Matt's going to cover this one in another slide. It's been a big project that the Trails Advisory Group has been working on for several months now. Temp hiring improvements. So the Wilderness Advisory Group and the Trails Advisory Group, we've kind of teamed up on this one over the last year, and we'll continue to do some more work on this. But in the WAGTAILs, or the Wilderness Advisory Group's annual newsletter that just was sent out last week, there's an article kind of more related to that work that we did there and trying to overcome some of the barriers that we're seeing with hiring our temporary or our 1039 workforce. And some of that work will continue with the Wilderness Group and the Trails Group in working with HR data folks to kind of analyze our success or maybe lack thereof over the years and try to identify maybe some of the changes in our processes that have helped or impeded that our ability to hire. We just started a couple months ago drafting a national trail volunteer and partner strategy and preparing or doing a fire study and how fire crews may or may not be able to help the trails program manager or trails crews accomplish that work, and that work is going to continue on into FY23. Really excited about that, kind of combining kind of some of the trail stuff that we do and the volunteer group, what they do, and compiling that into one overarching strategy. Going over to trails sustainability, that's another big piece of what we're doing. We're working on developing a trail sustainability evaluation tool. So looking at our trails and hey, how does that trail sit on the landscape and how sustainable is it? Looking at environmental, economical, and social in those 3 areas, how sustainable is that trail into the future? And then hopefully here shortly, we'll be able to roll that out to the field and you'll be able to start evaluating those trails for sustainability. Another one that we're moving on to data. Another one that I think everybody's super excited about is the infra trails modernization. It's a dinosaur, and it's time for us to come into the 21st century with that database, and we're kicking that off, and it's a real thing. So it's not just this hypothetical anymore, that it is coming. And then Survey 123 3 for track surveys and trail bridge inspections. That's available now for folks to use that to do their track surveys instead of having to, do the old paper. There's that application to do that with. Yeah, Brenda, let's go on to the next one.
Okay, I'll just interject briefly.
Yes.
Under training, we also are developing a training for line officers, Trail Management 101 for line officers. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of that. And then, yeah, as Dell already said, we're working with American Trails to stand up a trailskills.org or trailstraining.org website that would be the central hub for trails training. And then Infra Trails Modernization, I mean, this is groundbreaking, y'all. If any of you have worked with infra, and Matt is leading this effort. It's a multi-year effort. The agency is committing to this very heavy lift, a lot of time and effort and money through contractors and CIO to completely revamp infra trails, trail bridges, and access and travel management applications. So we are going for super simple, intuitive, easy to use, little to no training required in order to do it. So that's what's coming in the future. Just wanted to interject there. Now I'll go to the next.
Thanks for doing that, Brenda. I saw Chris's message in the chat about that line officer, and I meant to bring that up when I got there and forgot. And then the other thing too, I just mentioned to you, is that the WO Trail team over the winter, I believe they had 2 listening sessions with line officers, forest supervisors, and district rangers to kind of get their input and to try to figure out how to better message or communicate with them on their needs. So agency process. So this is another one. So, it's right there too, the listening sessions that we talked about. And then there was also twice a year, the WO's Trail team has committed to doing listening sessions with the field. We just completed those. When was that? April? Can't remember. We had 2 in April, and then we're going to do 2 in the fall again. So there'll be 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring every year for folks to interact with the WO Trails team. Another one that we're super excited about, and I think we're super close to launching, or we're right there, launched since the end of my detail, but the National Trail Program SharePoint site. So it's brand new. Things are still getting added to there, but it'll be our one-stop shop for documents and sharing information, trainings, a whole bunch of different things. We'll have somewhere to go. And I believe we're going to share that link. Is that correct, Andy? So look for that SharePoint site. The one drawback to that is it's only going to be for agency personnel. With our access restrictions, it will be only for Forest Service personnel. But going back to that National Trails or trailskills.org, hopefully we can use that too for our partners for some of that stuff. Another thing that the WO Trails group has been working with enterprises is best management practice documents to help the field in different areas. And these are the ones that are on the 22 program of work is NEPA. Trails NEPA specifically is what that one is. How to deal with trail work after natural disasters, and then converting roads to trails is another one that's coming shortly. And I think I just saw Andy saying we did do a, check. I just saw it pop up. Andy's on. I think there was another one that we missed there, but and then working together. That's another one that we're trying to implement. Diversity, equity, and inclusion in all these different things that we're doing. So the Next 100 Coalition Agreement, there's some great stuff going on there. So we're just trying to include that in all of our program delivery. I guess that's probably the best way to put that. And then there's the last element is National scenic and historic trails, and there's some great stuff going on there too, doing some work on the handbook. They're always working on the routes and finishing those routes, but the one that I was pretty excited about too is the reef training on NSHTs. With all the fires going on in California. Became apparent pretty quickly that was a resource that really wasn't getting the attention that it probably needed within the fire organization or as resource advisors on the fire. So they developed a training specifically for resource advisors and fire folks to understand the importance of that resource. And then one thing I wanted to jump back, one thing I forgot to mention about the elements of the trail challenges within the wilderness stewardship performance. We report those annually on our progress, or maybe if we're been stagnant or nothing's changed, we still report those numbers. So within the 10-year trail challenge, there's really not a whole lot of change in our reporting. Most of our reporting is going to be our regular reporting. Trails maintained to standard, trails meeting standard, trails improved. Those things haven't changed. There are going to be a couple additional reporting things into the future, specifically around workforce, trying to account for more of our volunteer hours. Not just miles of trails maintained, but some of those hours. And then the other ones, they're escaping me, but there really isn't going to be a whole lot of additional reporting requirements from this challenge. So with that,
I realized, Dale, that we gave you like 2 slides with a lot of information on there. So sorry. I'm curious at this point if there's questions on anything that Del just talked about before we transition. We have a couple slides of some things that we thought maybe you want to talk a little more in depth about, but if there's things that are on those 2 slides that people are interested in asking questions about, now would be a great time. I don't see anything in the chat.
I'll jump in because I see Mike had a comment in the chat about the reed and reef training for just general trails. And so I think, I really appreciate that comment. And we'll certainly look into that and see what we can do just for raising awareness of, the effects of fire, rehab and things on the trails, or fire suppression and then fire rehab.
Yeah, and I think that there's that best management practice document, and I can't remember off the top of it, but I think it's the natural disaster one that had some information in that, but probably not to the degree that we're looking for specifically reed or reef training related to that, but there is some information in that document.
So as part of our effort to professionalize the trail program, and really this does relate to wilderness and recreation as well, because those programs are also interrelated, but we realized that while other programs have been able to articulate what they need as a basic workforce to be successful, think fire and timber. And then once they were able to articulate that, they were able to get the funding and hire the personnel needed to be successful in their program areas. We didn't have that in trails or recreation. And so we aren't able to say, this is what we need. So we wanted to start a workforce analysis. The Trail Advisory Group worked with the WO Trails team starting last fall and worked through the winter, spring to start to put together documents and our thoughts around this. It's obviously a very complex topic. How do you articulate the need when trail programs across the country vary so much? I mean, different sizes, different volunteer and partner bases, different locations as far as relation to population centers, all kinds of factors that make it very complex to say, this is what we need to do the basics. But we just started with a very broad list of program roles and responsibilities. And then we started to parse those out and break those down into what programs need to be successful within shared stewardship. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And so what we came up with, I know this is a lot of words, sorry, just bear with me. But what we came up with was that we identified sort of 5 levels to the program workforce, trail program workforce, entry level, journey level. Man, I know I corrected that level for journey level. I know I did that. Still says level. Trail crew lead, trail manager, program manager. And we reference the GS levels mostly just as a reference point. We understand that volunteers, partners can do these different tasks in some capacity. But what we really honed in on was that it's critical to have each one of these levels accounted for within the program. Obviously, there can be shared positions that may do DevRec or wilderness and also do trails, so shared responsibilities. But if any of these levels are missing, it really creates a breakdown in efficiency. It puts a lot of burden on the layers above and below wherever the gaps lie. And obviously, different programs are structured differently, and those gaps fall in different places in different programs. But the results are kind of the same. It reduces our efficiency. It adds burden to both our partners and the employees working to fill that gap. And it usually breaks that obvious career ladder for people trying to move up in the trails program when they may be able to get to that 5, 6 level, but there's a break between the 7 and 9 level and it just jumps straight to that 12. It's hard for them to see how they can stay in the trails program and advance their career, develop those skills, and really let the knowledge and skills stay in the trail program and grow and develop. Not having all of those levels available and represented creates multiple issues. And we say, this is not an opportunity, or we're not trying to return to a trail crew on every district, but all of these layers have to be identified or represented. And the important thing is that if we're smart with our hiring, adding a position or a layer level back into a program can be a force multiplier. It gives you more capacity than just that one body, because now we're able to better work with our volunteers and partners to accomplish more work. And so some of the outcomes that are still yet to come from this are, we've developed a handful of documents that will be part of a package that is also going to accompany a workforce analysis tool that we're currently developing right now that looks at trail complexity and trail program complexity and how that relates to full-time equivalent employees, right? So here in the not too distant future, we will have a package that includes a write-up of, in more detail, of these levels, the roles and responsibilities of trail programs, some hypothetical org charts on how trail programs could be structured, and then the tool that will help programs sort of get a baseline on what their full-time employee base should look like to be successful and address all these levels. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. Obviously, that's sort of a quick rundown, and a lot more information with more detail will be coming out in the not too distant future. And I think it goes back to Andy. Oh, okay. These are different slides than the one that I clicked on. Let's just reference the docs. You can go ahead and move on. There we go.
Oh man, it's so hard to get that slide in there, but okay. So yeah, you covered it in the one before. And this actually plugs into what Matt was saying anyway, and this is that work. And I like this because the core competencies in getting a common language around who we are and what we do as trail workers, trail managers, trail partners, wilderness rangers, that having a common language, a professional trade language about the skills that we need to help elevate the whole program. And I think about this I'm sure you've all seen the trail class matrix, right? About the different trail classes. And it's not that that's 100% correct or it covers every single trail, but there's a way when I say trail class 2, we all know what a trail class 2 is. When I say trail class 3, we all generally can agree on that. And so the work through the partners, and I believe we put the 2-pager that American Trails had done a survey on this with over 200 respondents across all different organizations, not just the Forest Service, about these fundamental skills and the different kind of categories that they put them in. And so the whole purpose, right, is to elevate the profession of trail work, and then also to be able to then train people based off of these competencies. So ties back to what Dell was talking about, that trailskills.org will probably use these core competencies to organize the trainings. The next step that we're seeing on this basically is to say, okay, now these are the skills. Now we're at in that, as Matt had said, like entry level, journey level, expert level. Where do these competencies, what do you need to have? At what level do you need to have these specific skills to be considered this specific level? And it's not intended to be prescriptive. It's just, again, trying to help us talk about how and what we need at different levels in the organization. Okay, and then this is another one, again, so we picked 3 of these slides we thought would be really relevant to you all as wilderness rangers or wilderness enthusiasts or wilderness program leads. You probably have outfitter and guides in your wilderness. As part of that Trail Stewardship Act, there was a pilot program where you can offset the fees that an outfitter and guide would typically pay. You could use those fees, instead of paying them to you, you could use them to then do trail work. Right, and that was piloted on a number of different forests. It's now been opened, or it will be opened here shortly, to all forests. And so as you know, so I said my regular day job is as a deputy district ranger. I will think very hard about this, about whether, like, what I could do with my outfitter and guides that would improve trail work. And so the whole intent of it is to basically go, it's just one more tool. So it's discretionary. Your authorized official, whether that's your district ranger or potentially your forest supervisor, they're the ones who can make the decision whether or not they want to engage in it. And obviously the outfitter and guides have to be on board as well. But it's a really cool opportunity. It's just one more tool to say, hey, how can I use outfitter and guides to kind of complete more trail work than I would have otherwise? And so it's not required. Initially, you're going to see probably some pretty light sideboards on what that looks like. And then over the years, as it develops, people get creative. Maybe we pull it back a little bit. But the whole intent is that we can now take this tool to say, all right, outfitter and guides who usually do a lot of trail work for us, just out of the nature of how they have to get back to certain areas, how do you formalize that agreement and then have it work for both us and for the Forest Service, or for the Forest Service, the outfitter guides, and then for the public as well. So stand by for that. We should get some more information on it, but it's coming out here shortly, and it will be something that will be available to you and your authorized official.
All right, back over to my court here. We've just got a few more slides, so bear with us. And wanted to just wrap up a few key points about the Trail Challenge. So if you only take away a few things from today, when you think about the Trail Challenge, we really want you to be thinking about the fact that we are focused on supporting the field, not asking for more of the field. So we recognize there's a lot of work to be done at the regional and the national levels to, again, streamline processes, help to professionalize the trail program. All of these actions that Dell outlined and then Matt and Andy were talking about, it's all about helping to provide more support to the field over time. That we are working to raise awareness of the trails workforce. It includes all of the players, so it's employees, partners, and volunteers. That partners are not to be a replacement for employees. The agency has a role in providing trained trail professionals to be interacting with and working with and supporting partners and volunteers. So we're helping to raise awareness with our leadership about that as well. And then the Trail Challenge program of work that we've talked through, and that, you know, we've just touched on a few of the highlights. And again, in the guidebook, you'll see the full program of work for FY22. That is our national program of work. So we are completely aligned. So across the 5 trail teams that I mentioned at the very beginning, there's individual work from those trail teams, there's collective work under the National Trail Board, and that's all in our 10-year Trail Challenge program of work. That is our trail program of work. We are really focused on, this is to be useful. This is to be making a positive difference. This is not a strategy or an initiative. I'm not knocking strategies, but I'm just saying, like, this is actionable and measurable and impactful. And case in point, when we got feedback from the original challenge that was launched in February of 2020, and then I started permanently in this position December of 2020. And from that time, for about my first year in this position, I was hearing from folks that, yeah, I'm just not really clear. What is the challenge? Like, what are you asking of us, or what could we expect from it? What does it mean? How is it going to be impactful? And so we took that, those questions and to heart and said, yeah, we need to be more clear and more actionable with the challenge. And so that's the updated version that you see here. And so we will continue to make tweaks as we need to make sure that we're having the most impact. But I will say that I feel really good about this new structure with these 7 elements as these categories that we have actions then under, each year, because that gives us that stable framework of those 7 elements of the really important things like training, workforce, agency processes, data, and then our built-in flexibility to adapt to changing conditions, to new opportunities, new partnerships. That comes in our annual program of work with those action items. I will say that we were ambitious with our FY22 program of work because, well, we needed to start somewhere, and I'd rather start on the ambitious side than the flaccid side. So we'll see how much of our FY22 program of work we actually accomplish this year. We are well on our way with many, many things that we're anticipating will wrap up by September, but that will help inform our FY23 program. And then this updated version of the challenge really facilitates partner and volunteer engagement throughout. So the program of work that you see in the 10-Year Trail Challenge guidebook, we are working with our national level partners on developing that for FY23 and on implementing different actions in that list. So we are meeting regularly with American Trails is hosting these meetings with our national partners to say, oh, you know what? Several partners want to provide input onto the line officer management 101 training, right? From the partner side, they're experiencing things that they would like to help inform line officers about where they see issues arise. And so there's a lot of untapped potential here in working with our partners to move out on some of these national level things. Another example is piloting some regional training centers of excellence. Partners will be integral to that. We could go on, but let's see. So what are some of the things that field employees can be working on during the challenge? Again, the heavy lift is from the regional and national levels, but there are things that we have in the guidebook that can help you focus your efforts. So number one, be talking with your line officer about your trail network. Help them understand that trails are a profession. We'll be doing these things from the national level, but we also need you all to be having those conversations with your line officers. Be looking at how your trail program is actually working or where you might have those gaps. And we'll be, again, releasing more information about the workforce capacity analysis in the coming months. So that'll be a good starting point to talk with your line officer as well about how's your program working. Really look at it through fresh eyes. I know there's a lot of, we just are running, trying to keep up. Are there things that we could maybe be doing differently if we took a pause to think about it? And so I really encourage you all to talk with your line officer about that. There's a Trails community map, which actually, Matt, I'm not sure, is this ripe to be asking people to be filling that out, or are we on pause a little bit with the American Trails piece?
I think at this point, it's fine to just go ahead and pause on that. I do think the American Trails version is going to end up superseding what we created within the tag and the Forest Service. It's a great tool. I would still recommend people checking it out and feel free to participate in it. But I do think that the American Trails version is eventually going to take over and fill that spot.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So basically what the TCM or the Trails Community Map is a place for Trails professionals to put themselves, on the map in this database about what their skills are, if they're skilled at rigging or blasting or whatever, and then we can connect professionals with those who need their skills. So that's something that's coming. Trying to just kind of highlight some of the things here. The things you're already doing, take advantage of Great Immigrant Outdoors Act funding, take advantage of Legacy Roads and Trails funding, FLTP. So get in there. A lot of times the engineers lead out on those programs, those funding sources for Legacy Roads and Trails and Federal Lands Transportation Program. Elbow your way in there, talk with them. Trails are absolutely a legitimate source of a legitimate asset to be funded through those programs, but we're not always connecting well between rec and engineering in ways that we could. So So yeah, those are just some ideas. And it's really important to continue to do your annual reporting. And that's something that, you know, we are, again, it'll be much more simple in the future, but it really makes a difference. And that's how we can help to tell our story. If you all are recording how many miles of trail were maintained by force account, by contractor, by partner and volunteer, because the data that Andy shared earlier, that's just what we have that's been reported. But how much work has been done that has not been reported because, you know, infra is difficult, or you don't really understand or think that it's important, because what do we do with the data anyway? But it really helps us to tell our story. And then lastly, just for your awareness, well, and we do have several partners on the call. So ways that partners can engage in the 10-Year Trail Challenge, which again is just in the trail program in general, right? Because the challenge is about increasing our collective trail workforce capacity and increasing trail sustainability. Be working with other partners as much as possible to capitalize on opportunities and pool resources that for things that you wouldn't be able to do individually. Reach out to a Forest Service unit to offer assistance. And again, the more that you're part of a group rather than individual volunteers, that is very helpful for our limited capacity for our Forest Service staff. Really encourage partners to be getting certified as a crosscut or chainsaw sawyer. We are also, as I think Del mentioned earlier, we're really helping to raise awareness that volunteers can become certified major trail bridge inspectors. We have a backlog of being able to keep up with the inspections that are required every 5 years on our trail bridges. We also have trail bridges out there that haven't actually been put into infra yet. And so we have some data cleanup there, and that's where volunteers can be absolutely instrumental in helping with that. Writing grants, helping administer grants, and then getting involved with these education and outreach programs, especially since we have seen a lot of new users out on the trails from the pandemic, and a new recognition, or I say increased recognition of the importance of trails to so many different communities. The more that we can help educate people about how to, be nice, say hi, recreate responsibly, the better off we'll all be. So those are just some ideas. And again, these are listed in the guidebook as well. And that is the end of our presentation. And I'll go ahead and close this.
Go ahead and raise your hand. And we're just going to allow our panelists, our WO staff, to go ahead and answer questions live. Mike Hurd, do you want to go ahead and turn your camera on and ask a question?
Okay, thank you very much. This is directed at Matt. I've been working with my forest on it's nominally part of Trails Challenge, but it's really overdue work on getting our trails data suitable to publish in the interactive visitor use map. One of the hugely irritating problems that we've had is when we put new line work into GIS, we have to have the GIS specialist give us numbers that we then put into infra. And it seems totally absurd that this stuff should be automatically computed in infra, and then we have to do all that manual work. Is that something that you're going to be addressing in this new system? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So the original infra trails database system was strictly designed to be tabular data. And then as GIS grew in use and popularity and functionality, those two systems have never been able to work together the way they should. And our new trails database will be spatially based. So there will be a heavy GIS map component, and the tabular data and that spatial data will be able to communicate with one another. So when you make an update on the tabular data, it will be reflected in the spatial data and vice versa. If you resize a trail or do a new line in the GIS side, and you put that data into the spatial side, it should then automatically update the tabular side. So hopefully cut down on a lot of the manual work, trying to keep those two sides of the house in sync.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So I'm just going to note, and this has happened throughout your class if you're not watching this, you're getting a lot of whoots, hoorays, and thank goodness. So I think you're hitting it where it's really engaging the field, where it's really important to the field. So I don't see any more hands. Go ahead and raise your hands if you have another question for our WO panelists. But in the meantime, there was a little bit of chat going on, some really appreciation. Brenda, maybe you can expound a little bit on this idea of reeds for trails after fires, as we're seeing so much need for resource protection in regard to our trail infrastructure and so much fire. Can you go into that maybe just a little bit more? There was quite a little bit of conversation.
Sure, yeah, and the original action that we have for FY22 is to be raising awareness of national scenic and historic trails, these congressionally designated long distance trails, as special areas, as designated areas that need an extra level of care in terms of fire suppression and then fire rehab. And so actually Lindsay Steinwach, she's the Pacific Crest Trail Administrator, she developed a reed training to be presented. And then we're also working with well, it's on our list to start working with the regions to get the NSHT lines in the WFDIS, the Wildland Fire Decision Support System. So those are the two big things that we're moving out on for the National Scenic and Historic Trails. But per Mike's point in the chat, I think it's a really good thing that should be on our radar that we should work on is to help make sure that trails in general are recognized as a resource, an important resource to protect during fire suppression. And then, as Del had mentioned, we have this best management practices document that Enterprise Program is helping us pull together, managing trails after natural disasters, knowing that there's so many trails that have been affected mostly by fire, but in the southeastern region by flood and hurricane, tornado, those kinds of things. And so this document kind of will lay out, and it's very close to done. It should be done within the next month or two. It lays out things to be thinking about and prepared for before a natural disaster hits. So if you are a district trails program manager, here are some, a checklist of things to have, on your radar or already figured out or inventoried, so that if you have a disaster strike, then it sets you up to be better set up to have funding opportunities through BEAR or through other ways to address those the trail issues. So that will help, but the specific, like making sure that the fire world knows about trails as a resource to be protected in general, that definitely we can help to raise awareness of that. And we have been building more relationships at the national level anyway with the fire FAM folks on this fire study that's required by the Trail Stewardship Act of 2016 that says study the use of fire crews and trail maintenance. So we've been working with them on, okay, what does the study look like? When do we roll it out? How's the best way to talk with folks on the fire side? So I think that this is something that we could add to that conversation.
Great. Del, I did see your camera on for a minute. Did you want to jump into that conversation?
Yeah, so one of the things that just came out, I believe it was last month, is the new direction on the burn area rehabilitation or the BAR as well. And just for awareness, if you didn't see that email that new direction come out, for those that don't know, that there was a pilot, I think in the last couple of years, and I think it was very Region 5 specific maybe. I dealt with it on a BEAR assignment out there, but essentially now they've expanded that program to trails where through that funding source, we can replace minor infrastructure on trails. So if we have things burn up on the trails, we can request funding to repair those, whereas before it was mainly facility driven, signs, kiosks, restrooms, bridges were in there. Trail bridges were in there before, but that has expanded. So get with your resource advisor, your BEAR coordinators, your local unit to get more information on that and be prepared for that. And one of the caveats with that is that it had to be documented prior to the fire impacting, destroying, or whatever that infrastructure. So that's, again, another reason why it's so important to have our data updated and documented, that we had infrastructure so that we can, access those funds to replace that infrastructure.
Great, thanks, Del. Mike, I'm going to go back to you for a follow-up here in just a second. There's a one very specific example in the chat that has to do with this conversation, and that is, can we point to some specific information on historic trail restoration after fires? One of the historic trails, the Pony Express Trail, was burned. And so someone's just looking for some very specific help or information on that. So maybe that's a personal follow-up later or something to post to the chat, but wanted to draw to your attention to that. And then Mike, let's go back to you. I think you had a follow-up.
Yes, if that documentation after the disasters mentions specifically damages that result from fire suppression activities, it would be very helpful. It is true that those are always supposed to be taken care of by the incident management team, but there is not really a good awareness in the Reed and Reef community about trails as a resource. And that's just something that we all need to spread the word. We need to spread it to our line officers and our fellow resource advisors. So get the word out, and that will help immensely.
Thanks, Mike. And
Go ahead,
this this conversation is making me think this is something we need to cover in our line officer 101 training. So we'll be sure to add that in. And then to Linda's comment in the chat about more information on historic trail restoration, especially referring to the Pony Express Trail. So that is something that is on our FY23 list for the NSHT program, is to have some best practices of trail restoration. So I'm not aware of anything that is currently created at a large scale, but I can sure ask around. And I'm thinking that the Park Service would probably be a better resource. So I'll ask my counterpart in the National Park Service, because they manage and administer the vast majority of the National Historic Trails out there. So if you want to email me, Linda, or maybe direct message me your email, and then I'll connect you with the right people. Let's do that.
Great, thanks for that follow-up. Sorry, I interrupted you there. All I was going to say was this emphasis of connecting line officers just keeps coming up, whether it's fire restoration, trail recognition. So again, I think that's come up over and over again. Very important. Glad to see you targeting that.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, if it's not part of the inbriefing for the IMT, for the incoming IMT, it's going to be missed. And I will say I was on the Dixie fire right after, I think it was right after they bulldozed a 6-mile section of the PCT. So.
Yeah. Okay. So we have just maybe 3 or 5 minutes left for discussion if anyone has any remaining questions. Otherwise, I do want to point out that all of our WO staff has graciously put their emails in the chat. Please contact them if you have any input to this conversation, because I know they have open ears. This conversation has been well attended here and also across the country here previously. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing about database modernization. So as we move into actually this process, I'm going to be needing assistance from folks in the field that collect data, input data, do things like that to help test the developments that we're doing, the updates that we're doing to the database. So if anybody in this group is interested, feel free to shoot me an email and let me know that I could put you on a list. I'm not asking people for a huge ask. I'm trying to get a large bullpen of potential testers so that if your current work situation just doesn't allow you to respond, we've hopefully got a big enough group that somebody is able to respond quickly and work with us to help test out the new products as we roll them out. So just wanted to put that plug in there.
Sounds like a great idea for some field involvement. So with that, the National Wilderness Skills Institute wants to thank you for being here with our National Trail Program staff and for such wonderful engagement from both the staff and the participants.